Hey folks, today I want to cover my thoughts and a final review for Aliens Fireteam Elite. Recently released last week. Been playing a good bit over the last week or so, just trying to get a sense for the game and just put out my review on my experiences here. I put about 15 hours or so into the game. I've tried the campaign, the horde mode, the extra class. I've looked into the studio a little bit. So let's talk about what I think about Aliens Fireteam Elite. Now, behind the video, I'm going to put some horde mode footage. There is a campaign for the game. It's 4 total acts, each with 3 different missions on it. So there's 12 missions total for the campaign. I think on average, if you're playing on standard difficulty, it'll probably take you 5 to 7 hours to finish the campaign. So there is one. It does have a story, and I think it is pretty true to the side of the Aliens franchise that people like, which is a little bit different than maybe the Colonial Marines or even Isolation in recent memory. But it is decent. So if you're looking for a campaign, I'm not going to spoil that for you story wise. You're likely going to have to play it multiple times if you end up grinding the game a lot anyways. But just to make sure that people don't watch a review and get spoiled for the game, we're going to have just basic horde footage in the background, which is just you're getting attacked by a bunch of xenomorphs. The bugs are flying in, and you have to defend yourself for endless waves. So that way you can at least see the combat. So what is the game? It is a 3-person co-op shooter. They kind of market it in the same vein as things like Back 4 Blood or Left 4 Dead, where you're in a group and it's like a PvE grind co-op experience. You are basically playing as the Colonial Marines from the Aliens universe, and you go through different missions facing off against synthetics and xenomorphs that are rushing towards you. And you can get different classes in the game. Currently, there are 4 base classes, and then there's a 5th you unlock when you finish the campaign. And each one has 2 different abilities, a passive, and then they have this kind of very sci-fi style talent tree where you can place down buffs and bonuses and connect them to different abilities, which we'll get into a little bit later. So the idea is that you're a 3rd person shooting guns, using abilities to face giant waves of xenomorphs to survive and get to the end, and they have different ways to interact with it. So I think as a core game, the core gameplay is actually really good. I think that the reviews that it got were unfair for the quality of the game that Cold Iron and 20th Century and Focus delivered on. The gunplay feels good. The animations on the characters could be better, but they're not bad by any means. They actually look decent. And they are fast enough to fit the gameplay. And oftentimes, if you give an animator a very short period of time to animate something, especially something complicated like a roll or reload, it's hard for them to do anything fancy with a flourish, because if they have 0.1 seconds to reload with a modifier, it can end up just being a very fast animation. So I think overall the gun sounds feel good. The shotgun particularly feels really good. Good sound, good echo, good reverb. It's got kind of a guttural emphasis to it. The feedback when you shoot is good. The recoil is simplistic, but it works for what it is. And you get kind of a feedback on hit, feedback on headshot, feedback on kill. And there's a good amount of weapons to choose from. Each class has 2 different weapon slots that they can pick from. And then you get different weapons in those slots, right? So your class might have a rifle and then a handgun. So there's a bunch of different rifles. There's burst rifles, pulse rifles, single shot rifles, sniper rifles. So you can choose your loadout based on that and then decide what your rifle's going to be. And then you can choose your secondary as well. And just like co-op shooters, you'll encounter different kinds of enemies. There's several kinds of the base enemies, and there's the hero enemies or the strong mobs, the elite mobs of different kinds. Some that are similar to the movies, and then there's ones that'll pin you down. There's ones that'll spit at you from far away. There's really powerful elite mobs that come in with high HP, and they can grab you and pick you up and deal damage to you. So you have to kind of work with your team to do that. I do wish there was a wider variety of them. There are some that have armored heads that have different weak points. There are some that fight from distance, some that are close up. But honestly, I would say that they probably could have added several different types that felt different enough. I mean, oftentimes you'll just end up popping a stim and pumping down the weak point and treating them almost exactly the same, except for the spitters that don't come in melee range, right? Those are the ones that will sit from far away and spit at you, and they'll actually hide behind cover, so you have to kind of get around the corner to get to them and deal with them that way. You have a special inventory that you can use to place down mines and turrets and all those sorts of gadgets, which ends up feeling good. And especially in the horde mode, you can buy these with credits you earn by surviving waves, and they end up kind of helping you out. And they give you a lot of King of the Hill fight opportunities, both in the campaign and in the horde mode, where you get to an objective, you hit the button, it angers a bunch of bugs. They come descending upon you, and you can set up turrets and healing stations and mines and traps and triggers and freezing mines to kind of hold down the point, and then you move on in the campaign. Or in the horde mode, that's basically the entirety of the horde mode. And I think all that stuff feels really good. The gameplay itself feels good. There's a good amount of options there. My gripes with the game were not centered around the base, like the foundation of it. My gripes with the game were basically, it felt as if they got the base game, and this may have happened. This happens a lot with development, where if you're given a deadline by by publishing or by marketing or whatever, you're just going to run out of money and you have to ship the game. You scope down to just the basics, polish it up, and then ship it. And then, since we're in an age where you can do games as a service and release live content updates, then you start expanding upon it. And that kind of is the vibe I'm getting from Aliens Fireteam Elite right now, is that the bones are good, right? It's got all the things that you need. I just feel like it doesn't have enough content or enough variety or enough grind to justify $40 right now. I think it's really close. And I think if you love co-op shooters, you love PvE grind games, or you just love the Alien franchise, I think this is a game that's worth picking up. It's true to form, and it feels good, and you're gonna have a good time. I think the average person would probably get a good 8 to 12 hours of fun from this game. And then, they are updating the game as well. So in like a week, we're going to get a brand new class added to the game, and they have promised more updates as well. And we may even get a DLC of some kind. And I think once the game has maybe twice the amount of missions for campaign, more weapons, and then they start adding stuff that you can, if they started adding like really unique boss fights, because there is a boss fight in the game. Most of it's just like you're getting rushed down by a lot of different things that I won't spoil right now. And then there is a boss towards the end of the campaign, but it's not, I wouldn't say that it scratches the itch that a boss fight normally would. And that's all I'll say about that. But I think if they can add, if you look at games like, even games like Outriders, Destiny, Destiny, and you can get, even Warframe has done this a bunch. There's a lot of loot shooters and PvE shooters and grind games that find ways to keep you interested and keep you grinding for long periods of time. And I think if they can add that to this game over time with new content updates, adding more classes and characters and missions and maps and encounters, and they expand upon the RPG system where you get weapons and attachments that have stats and benefits and bonuses, and you can modify your abilities. I think they've got a pretty cool game. It'll give you enough to grind for long periods of time, and it may even be one of those games where you just come back with your friends, you spend a good couple days playing it, and then when the DLC comes out, you do it again, and you just keep coming back to enjoy the new experience. Because I think the core game is solid. It's definitely worth your time, and I think it's something that if you're interested in, pick it up. Now that's the overview. Let's get into some of the nitty gritty, nitpicky stuff that I at least things that I noticed while playing, or things that I experienced, and things that were really cool or just kind of detracted from the experience. The big thing for me was it is a swarm type game, and you're meant to get swarmed. And I think one of the things about the Alien franchise, or Aliens franchise, is the fact that they come from everywhere. And I think they did a decent job trying to capture that magic by having them crawl all over the walls and the ceilings, jump over railings, and come from all directions. And you often do get surprised because they'll time attacks where a pounce mob will be hiding around a corner, or they'll come from a hole in the wall you didn't see. But I think that system needs to be expanded on a lot more. It seemed like they used specific grapple points on maps where the aliens can crawl, right? So they will crawl along walls or ceilings along the same exact path. And I think this is great for AI pathing because it will prevent them from having a lot more bugs and issues where they'll get stuck somewhere or their path somewhere and get stuck. And honestly, barring a few major kind of soft lock situations, they didn't really get stuck all that often, relative to how complicated and how horde-like the fights are. But they do follow very, very similar paths, and there are parts in the campaign and even in the horde mode where you can just keep your reticle on one choke point where you know they land on a wall and just keep spamming and you'll hit them all in the head because they have to jump from the floor to the wall to that exact spot that they grab onto the wall at, and they'll follow a very predictable path. So while they do crawl on the walls and the ceilings, it is a little predictable, and it is a little kind of mechanical. Not that you know, it definitely works for what it is, but once you see it and how it functions, it's very abusable and kind of repetitive in that standpoint. So I'd like to see them kind of be able to, and maybe it's something they just reduce scope on and try to get the game out and say, you know, we'll add more complicated pathing or ways that the aliens can move around. But you'll see them kind of move along this same arc pretty often when it comes to crawling on other surfaces. Another nitpick that I had was around the class efficacy. There's a couple classes that are that seem, I mean, just class balance, honestly, that are a little bit stronger than others. I mean, you're not gonna be able to get this right with internal testing anyway, because you don't have the plethora of people that are going to play and break all the builds and all that. But one that stuck out to me the most was the healing station for the doc class, which is the medic or the healer. It had some really awkward interactions where it has a number of charges when you put it down that heals everybody. And I understand in a survival kind of scenario, you don't want people to be overly reliant on the healing class, nor do you want it to be so broken that you have to have one on your team. But the way it works is that the only way for the healing class to refill the charges on their healing station is to pick up a med kit, which gets kind of awkward, right? Because if you're at full HP and you have a med kit, then you can't pick up a med kit. You only have one in your inventory. So as a doc player, there's been some kind of awkward interactions where one, you like take a little bit of damage so you can use your med kit and then pick up a med kit so it can refill your station. Or you have situations where, and I've had this in public lobbies, where the doc player wants to go up to people and heal them with med kits and then pick up the med kits themselves, because then you get double value where the doc player gets a med kit and then they can refill their healing station as well. So there's value there, but then, you know, people that are just playing the game and walking around, they pick up a med kit and then the doc player gets pissed because they want to pick up all the med kits. I think there's just some, you know, co-op and general, you know, gameplay design that can be polished up there. And I think most of the classes have that, where there's some of their abilities are really good and some things could just be improved on, but all that's very changeable with live updates. So that's super nitpicky and very minor. But I did want to mention it if you're someone that like really likes class balance, especially in a co-op PvE game. The loadout system is rather basic, but I think it works. It's one of those things where you can't really overly complain about it because it's functional and it's fun, but it's not something that you get crazy excited about. So you have the two abilities and then you can modify them, and then you have your two weapons and you can put attachments on them. Most of the stats and benefits you get are just around the base properties or traits that the combat has. So enemies have weak points. You can scale weak point damage. There's stability and accuracy, so you can fire your gun better. You can increase mag size. You can increase reload size. All the benefits are basically percent increases or decreases on these traits and properties, which overall isn't, you know, it's not the flashiest thing in the world, but it doesn't work. You can get some builds going with really fast reload, or, you know, I ran some builds with high weak point damage. And so when, you know, elite enemies would come along, I could shoot them in the head a bunch of times and stagger them, or deal bonus crazy damage or scaling on that, which ends up feeling good. But I would say that because of this, combined with the fact that you have long horde encounters, it does get a little repetitive. You're just using your abilities on cooldown, and all the benefits you're getting gear-wise, and it's called combat rating, which is basically just a gear score for your character. All of that's around just kind of increasing percent on your base stats. There's not, I wouldn't say there's like a crazy amount of very new things that come out of the attachments and the loadout system. You can get things like your headshots cause a small explosion, or you leave fire pits around. I think they're very undertuned in that most of them aren't game breaking or noticeably powerful, but you do see them. In the footage you're seeing on screen, I do have an attachment for my shotgun where if I get a headshot or a weak point shot, it will do a minor fire explosion around them, which does 2.5% of the hit damage, I believe, to everyone in a small area. Not super impactful, looks cool, feels good, but I think that's just kind of one of those things that really enforces the vibe that I had for this game, is that I had a lot of fun, it looks good, it plays well, and all I could say is I want more. I want more maps, I want more content, I want more variety, I want more customization, more loadouts, and more encounters and boss fights and all that stuff. So I think, again, this might be one of those games where it starts out, as it is now, but then over the course of 6 to 12 months or 2 years, they add so much content to it that it just gets bananas, right? It just gets really, really cool. They add 10 more classes and boss fights, and they kind of pick up on the loot shooter aspects that other games have done well, and they start allowing you to really, really customize your character, and there's team combos and things like that that really start playing on top of it. But it does kind of suffer from the same things that almost all co-op shooters suffer from, and that's just long-term replayability, where when you've kind of mastered it, what do you do? How do you keep people interested, right? And I think Left 4 Dead had the modding community. There's definitely DLCs they can do, but that's kind of for the genre that it is, I think it does well. I wanted to show out the perk, the grid, the perk grid for the characters, just so you kind of get a sense of the depth. This is going to be once you've leveled your character up to unlock. Most of these spaces are locked when you first pick a character, and then you unlock the spaces, and you can unlock different core and modifier perks that allow you to change your gameplay. So this is what it looks like towards the end of the game when you kind of got everything unlocked. And it is, very much that sci-fi loadout scheme where you're playing Tetris, right? So you can take these things and attach them and build things down on top of them that allowed you to modify your skills. Your skills are on the outside, so this is your passive here on the bottom, and then left and right are your 2 abilities. So anything that's attached to your ability will benefit it, right? So I have extended duration on my support drone. So now this is attached, it is affecting my support drone. But you can see that since you have freedom of building, you can actually start taking these and moving these around. But you can also add more to an ability that you want to scale more of. So I like this UAV ability called Pups for the Recon, which is basically you can highlight enemies through walls and see enemies and get a benefit. So I added a lot more. So I started using more of the middle ground to scale that ability specifically, so you can build more items along that road to that specific ability to be able to. So you can grab this and I can go, I can get these here and start adding these onto the different thing. And then as you can see, they're connected to this ability. And it is actually pretty interesting. It does allow you to get some, different variations in your build. And there are some interesting things in here. There's one that really stuck out to me as a benefit. This one here, Got Your Back. Killing an enemy that is attacking a teammate instantly reloads both you and your teammate's equipped gun. So there are some things like this that are very interesting, right? So if a teammate is being attacked by an alien or a synthetic, and I get the save or the rescue, it'll reload both our guns instantly. So we get a lot of benefit from that, and it does change my gameplay because now I'm looking to kind of pick off any monsters that are going after my teammates. And in higher difficulties, you have team fire, so you have to be very careful about shooting your teammates. But there is some depth there that's really cool, and I think, again, if you're into this kind of stuff, don't worry about the reviews. Don't worry about the negatives, the mixed reviews you've seen online. I think this game is worth it, but you have to be pretty jived and pretty jazzed about it, because if you're just kind of into it, you'll probably only get about 6 to 8 hours of gameplay out of it, finish the campaign, maybe play a little end game, and then you'll probably be done with it from then on. And I think that does it for my thoughts on Aliens Fireteam Elite. I think it is a good, solid foundation for a game. It needs more added to it, and it looks like they are adding more. We're already getting a new class. So if they end up doing DLCs or expansions, or even just adding lots of free updates to it, I think, in a year or two, this game could be, a staple for some people. They play it all the time, or they have it in their rotation. So it's definitely a good, solid game that I think has been unfairly reviewed for how solid it actually is. So that's it for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video or you learned something or you just liked it overall, leave a like down below, and I will see you in the next one.